The wind shrieks, slicing across the frozen steppe at minus 45 degrees Celsius. Beneath a stone roof glazed with frost, a few shadowed figures huddle close, wrapped in thick furs, crouched around a flickering fire. They are children, laughing beside a grandmother whose hands work steadily, threading needle through hide. A man, crouched in silence, sharpening a rough shard of stone for hours, preparing for the dawn to come. Figures slip from camp before sunrise, silent, determined, vanishing into a land of death, where only hunger and cold are certain. A battle unfolds against a mammoth, monstrous and unyielding. It was the cruelest cold ever etched into human memory. Yet what archaeologists uncovered in ancient caves were not the traces of despair. At Dolny Vistonis, clay figurines surfaced from the frost-bitten earth, proof that art endured through scarcity and storm. In Russia, houses rose from hundreds of mammoth bones, assembled with such precision that even modern architects would bow their heads in awe. 33,000 years ago, temperatures didn't just fall, they plunged. But our ancestors called it home. In caves scattered across Europe and Asia, archaeologists found no curled skeletons of the starved, but remnants of intricate societies. They were engineers who birthed the first weatherproof garments, artists who painted masterpieces in the dancing light of flame, caretakers who watched over one another, never letting a soul be left behind. They did not merely survive that frozen hell, they conquered it, and this is their story. To understand how far humanity journeyed through the Ice Age, we must begin from the land that first held them, Africa. Homo sapiens arrived later than other human species, but they carried something different: the ability to imagine, to communicate, and to remember, foundations upon which culture would rise. While glaciers swept across North America and Europe, turning soil to frozen desert, Africa was not buried beneath walls of ice. Much of it remained green, not a perfect refuge, but a cradle of transition. From that land, they slowly pushed northward, where they encountered the long-settled inhabitants of the Middle East and Europe, Neanderthals, who had walked those lands for hundreds of thousands of years. They were masters of the cold, short and broad, their bodies dense and lungs tuned for dry air, their eyes larger, made for the dim light of northern winters. Homo sapiens did not merely observe them. They blended. The mingling of these two human species leaves more than a trace in the genome. It sparked an evolutionary leap. Fragments of Neanderthal DNA, stitched into the Homo sapiens code, carried with them the hard-won lessons of survival honed over millennia in icy lands. The BNC2 gene, fine-tuned for skin pigmentation, became a key, unlocking more efficient absorption of light at high latitudes, where the sun is pale and winters are long. Immune system genes like TLR1, TLR6, and TLR10 sharpened the body's defenses, allowing it to recognize and respond quickly to bacteria and viruses. This was a moment of metamorphosis. These genes endure, preserved by natural selection, because they offered a greater chance to endure. No longer was slow adaptation the only path. Through this genetic alchemy, Homo sapiens advanced faster, deeper into the realm of ice. In Denisova Cave, nestled within the Altai Mountains of Siberia, scientists uncovered a tiny object from 50,000 years ago, crafted from animal bone, barely 3 inches long, polished smooth through hours of patient labor. A needle. Before that, humans wore animal hides like hastily wrapped blankets. But that was not enough when the cold tightened its grip from the north. No one could have survived minus 45 degrees in the Ice Age. Large needles for outerwear, medium ones for mid-layers, fine ones for ornamentation. Only when skins were stitched tight, seams sealed to the tendon, could water be kept out, and warmth kept in. A needle was not merely a tool, it was the bridge between idea and craft, between survival and oblivion. The three-layer system, inner for moisture, middle for warmth, outer for wind, was not a modern invention. Our ancestors used it 40,000 years ago. But instead of synthetics, they drew from the gifts of nature. Down from polar birds, light as breath, yet superb at wicking sweat. Arctic hair fur, sewn with the nap so that water ran down its length and slid away. Reindeer hair, hollow in structure, trapping heat like a greenhouse skin. And the outermost layer, often made from wolf fur, was the crown of all choices. It repelled water, resisted frost, and remained supple even at -50. Each species left a fragment of itself in this evolutionary thread. At many dwelling sites, archaeologists even found miniature garments, not toys, but clothing for children. Cut and sewn with the same precision as adult attire, each piece of hide joined from dozens of smaller parts, treated individually, then assembled into a finished pattern. They are proof that Ice Age people did not live only for the now. They prepared for those who would come after. A single needle, no longer than a handspan, opened a continent. It did not merely bind hide to hide. It stitched the scattered pieces of life into a durable civilization. The grasslands were no longer green. The growing season shrank, plants withered beneath a thin crust of ice, and wild fruits could no longer sustain human life. In that cold, dry world, humans were forced to change. They no longer waited to forage. They began to follow the greatest wanderers on land, the megafauna. Woolly mammoths and rhinoceroses roamed endlessly. Humans moved quietly behind them, to learn the rhythm of migration, to read the living maps carved into the land by giants. And people became a species with no fixed home. Where the wind drowned out voices and the snow lay deep enough to bury footsteps, finding shelter was not merely difficult, it was a matter of survival. Then one day, a stray shovel struck the earth near Mezhyrich, Ukraine, and from the soil rose a pale yellow pillar, not stone, not wood, but bone. The massive jaw of a mammoth. Skulls laid tight together, shoulder blades stood as walls, tusks driven deep, like tent stakes into frozen ground. Not a temporary shelter, a house, built from the remains of more than 140 mammoths. Why bone? Not just because wood was scarce, but because bone had what wood did not. It repelled water, trapped dead air in its marrow, and stood firm against sudden swings in temperature. A house made of bone could be 20 degrees warmer inside than out. In many sites, generations returned to the same foundation, not only for convenience, but for meaning. Each added bone became a layer of memory, and the work was continued with the same methods. Each ridge, each joint, a language that never vanished. Our ancestors did not build with stone and brick. They built with the patience of those who believed cold could not strip away hope. On lands where no one was meant to live, they raised roofs, not just to take shelter, but to declare we were here, and we remained. During the coldest phase Earth has ever known, humans still kept the fire. But it was no longer the fire their ancestors had once used. At -50 degrees, a common flame was no longer enough to survive. At Dolny Vyastonis, 26,000 years ago, people made ceramics not to store food, but to store heat. They crafted fire-resistant objects, heated by day, radiating warmth through the night. Fragments found show an astonishing mastery of temperature, each layer of clay mixed with precision, each piece fired for just the right time. They didn't need a large hearth. They needed an efficient one. A place where a single flame could serve an entire group. A pit where stones were heated, then lowered into earth ovens, holding warmth long enough to cook without open fire. Fire was not just heat. It was a tool, a technology, a pillar of social structure. But in a world where wood was rarer than gold, keeping fire alive was a survival art. Across the frozen plains, trees were sparse and stunted. Even a young birch branch could mean life. So our ancestors found something else. They burned bone. They made fat lamps. These were not improvised solutions. In the unbroken night of northern winters, a lamp was not just a light. It was warmth itself, the center of hope. For millennia, one fire lost could mean the end of an entire group. And so they learned to keep it alive, not roaring, but smoldering. Burning slow, steady, enough to make it through the night. The fire of the Ice Age was not bright, not blazing, not loud. But it lived on, hidden in charred bone, in animal oil, in fired clay, and in memory. In the common imagination, prehistoric humans shouted, charged at a giant beast, and hurled their spears with all the strength left in their arms. But the truth was far less simple. The human arm was never strong enough to kill an elephant. But Homo sapiens did not rely on strength. Their weapons were more than just sharpened stones. Clovis points, carefully shaped spearheads, secured to wooden shafts with dried sinew and pine resin. The bases were polished to prevent cracking on impact. But what they turned into deadly tools was the way they were used. Instead of thrusting forward, hunters fixed the point into the ground at a precise angle. Then, they lured the animals into the trap. When a 9-ton mammoth hurled all its momentum forward, it was the beast itself that drove the spear deep. The true hunt had begun. Humans couldn't outrun antelope, but they could run longer. On dry, frozen plains where snow preserves every footprint and drops of blood, hunters pursue prey for hours, even days. They took shifts, rotated, and never stopped. While the heart of the animal beat in panic, humans ran by will alone. They didn't need to win in minutes. They only needed not to give up. They always chose their ground, standing downwind, lying in ambush along familiar paths, distracting when needed. It was a test of strategy, technique, and collective intelligence. At Schöning in Germany, archaeologists found wooden spears dating back 400,000 years. These seem crude weapons were crafted with remarkable precision. Weighted tips for penetration, streamlined shafts to cut wind resistance, and balanced centers for optimal flight. Then humans invented leverage. The spear thrower, Atlatl, appeared over 30,000 years ago, multiplying throwing force by 4. A hand-thrown spear might travel a few meters, but with an Atlatl, it could reach 150 kilometers per hour, punching through mammoth hide from 40 meters away, like an arrow from a modern bow. And our ancestors passed, not by brute force, but by learning to see the world through the movements of their prey. They didn't fight nature. They learned to move with it. On the hardened ground of Lake Willandra, in the far west of Australia, time has left footprints. Nearly 20,000 years old, they do not belong to one person, but to a group. Adults, children, even the staggering steps of someone injured, leaning on a companion. This was not a hunting party. This was a family. They did not leave behind the slowest. They did not separate the weakest child. At Shanidar Cave, in the Zagros Mountains, archaeologists found the skeleton of a Neanderthal man. His arm missing, one eye blind, a broken leg long healed. No one survived such injuries for years without care. In a 26,000-year-old grave, Dolny Vestonij, they found an elderly woman. Her teeth worn down to the gums. Her joints severely degenerated. She could not hunt, could not gather, perhaps could not even walk. She was buried with formal ritual. Red ochre, carefully placed grave goods. No one tends to someone like that if they are only a burden. In a world without books, Each elder was a living library. They remembered the seasons of plants, the taste of each root, the way to tell poison from medicine by the edge of a leaf. Humans have the longest dependency period of any species. Children take years to learn to walk, to survive. While the mother still carried one child and the father hunted, who watched over the others? The answer is found in silver hair. To raise the young beyond the bounds of blood. That is something only humans do. The elderly of the Ice Age did not survive by chance. They survived because they were needed. They were storytellers, carrying vital knowledge in song, in tale, in tattoo, in symbol. They were mediators in conflict. They were the glue that held the group together when it threatened to break. Your ancestors crossed the coldest ages, not because they were stronger, but because they knew how to hold on to one another. And if you're here today, it may be because someone, long ago, chose not to abandon the last among them. Around 12,900 years ago, the world collapsed once more. In less than a decade, winter returned with a fury without warning. The Earth's climate system shut down. Scientists call this period the Younger Dryas. But for those who lived through it, it was the end of the world. In North America, the Clovis culture, masters of flint craftsmanship, hunters who once brought down mammoths with precision tactics, vanished from the archaeological record. For predators like the saber-toothed cat, the story turned even crueler. As mammoth calves, bison, and wild horses dwindled, some began to tear into one another. And then, they too were gone. The mammoth steppe, a vast and thriving biosphere, shifted. Every link in the chain began to shake. And humans? They stood on the brink, but did not fall. Instead of waiting for meat to pass by, they turned to what no predator would touch. Hard seeds, tough roots, bitter bark, fibrous tubers. Things that had to be crushed, roasted, soaked, leached, to become food. The revolution began, not with a blade, but with a stone mortar. The Natufian culture, backed into history's corner, invented something unheard of: intentional cultivation. At Abu Huraira, Syria, archaeologist Gordon Hillman uncovered unmistakable signs. Human teeth worn unnaturally flat from grinding grain, and plant remains showing early domestication. Agriculture did not begin with abundance. It began with hunger. And in one fragile moment, the foundations of civilization were sown, not from hope, but from desperation. Under the beam of a flashlight cast across the chamber of Lascaux, a scene appears that makes you take a step back. A herd of aurochs thunders across the stone ceiling, their movement so vivid, it seems to halt your breath. Horses are rendered with anatomical precision, almost too accurate to believe. A bison, mid-fall, heart stopped by a spear, its legs stretched out in a way only someone who had witnessed death could have captured. September antlers, their velvet just shed, alongside the coats of horses marking the seasons. Thick for winter, light for summer, swollen bellies for spring. It is not just form, they painted time. These caves are living libraries. In Germany, beneath 43,000 years of dust, lay a flute carved from the wing bone of a griffin vulture. The Divjababe flute, made from the femur of a cave bear, is 60,000 years old. Each material, swan bone, mammoth ivory, was chosen not just for its availability, but for its acoustic soul. For these people, music was not entertainment. It was a social glue, a memory device, and a cure for despair. In the modern imagination, the Ice Age is an era of scarcity, struggle, and short lives. But archaeology is revealing a different portrait. They were makers of art, of music, of ritual and culture. A civilization blazing bright amid the ice. The Ice Age shaped us. It molded our bodies, our minds, and the way we live together. The Age of Ice taught us resilience, cooperation, and endurance. The Age of Warmth taught us innovation, accumulation, and growth. Our challenge is synthesis, to combine the wisdom of the Ice Age with the capabilities of the present. The ice has melted, and with it, an entire world is gone. But from that melting, everything we are was born. We too are entering an ice age of our own. And when it comes, will we panic? Will we falter? Or will we rise as our ancestors once did and face it together?